This video lecture covers Objective 3, Use Process Costing in the first production department. And how does process costing work here? And basically, using weighted average assumption. So we know that there are two possible assumptions. One is FIFO, first in, first out. We're not going to talk about that in this class. But if you continue on to take accounting 3030, advanced cost accounting, then we will talk about FIFO. FIFO is a little bit more complicated and compared to weighted average assumption. So we're going to focus on the weighted average assumption. So there are 5 primary steps to process costing. So first, we need to summarize the flow of physical units. Second, we need to compute output in terms of equivalent units. 3, we are going to summarize total costs to account for. 4, compute the cost per equivalent unit. 5, assign total cost to units completed and to units in ending work in process inventory. So these 5 steps are primary steps that we need to deal with in the process costing. So the number 1, the first step, we're going to summarize the flow of physical units. So let's take a look at this table. So basically, we try to take a look at 2 questions, try to answer how many physical units were worked on, and we don't care whether they are completed or not. And the total physical units accounted for. So what happened to those units? So are they finished? Are they still in process? So this is basically the importance of these 2 questions. We try to understand these physical units. Where are they, and what is the status of them? So if you look at this table, we're going to focus on this B column, the step 1, flow of physical units. I'm going to walk you through this entire table here, the column here. So if you look at what's happening here is, first we want the units to account for. So beginning working process October 1, so basically we have 0 flow of physical units. And during October, we are going to manufacture 50,000 units. So together, we are going to look at 50,000 physical units to account for. Whether they will be completed or not is irrelevant. All we care is how many physical units that we are going to consider in this physical period, in this month, or maybe in this manufacturing period. So we just wonder, okay, we are going to take a look at 50,000 units in the process costing. The next is we try to understand their status. So basically, units accounted for. So in this case, we have 40,000 units completed and transferred out during October. And therefore, we have 10,000 units left in the working process. And therefore, you can see that you still have 50,000 physical units. So here is the deal. When you work on the units to account for and units accounted for, you should end up with same number of physical units. Okay, so you should have 50,000 units for the units to account for, as well as 50,000 units for units accounted for. So these 2 numbers should be identical. Okay, the first one tells you how many total physical units I will focus on. The second one tells you that the status of these physical units. Are they completely transferred, or are they left in the ending inventory? So the step 2, that's a different thing. So we're going to come back to step 2 in a minute, but I hope step 1 give you a pretty good idea how to deal with the flow of physical units. Now we're going to take a look at this particular case. So this company had 19,000 units in the beginning inventory of working process on September 1st. Okay, 19,000 units. During September, 100,000 units were started into production. So in addition to 19,000, you're going to have 100,000 units. On September 30th, 29,000 units were left in the ending inventory. So summarize the physical flow of units in a schedule. Okay. So if you pull out the question information and use a table to display all these numbers and status, what's happening here is this PowerPoint slide. So first of all, you're going to take a look at units to account for. So units to account for is basically I try to find out a total number of physical units I'm going to study. So, and in this case, it's always you look at the beginning working process and also the new production. So you have 19,000 units left from the prior year of prior month, and also you plan to work on additionally 100,000 units. So therefore, when you add them, you should find the total physical units to account for, am I right? And if you look at the units accounted for, we only know that the one status that we have 29,000 units actually in the any inventory of working process. The question does not say anything about complete and transferred out, okay, but we will find out that later. So it's pretty easy to look at the units to account for first, because you have a beginning working process 19,000 from prior month, and you have new production which is 100,000. So when you add these two numbers, you can see that okay, we have 119,000 total physical units to account for. And I don't know their status yet, but I know I need to work on 119,000 units. Okay. And then we come to these units accounted for. As I said, the tip here is the total physical units to account for should be the same as the one for total physical units accounted for. It says not given, but once you find 119,000, you're going to copy paste it here. So therefore, what's happening is we can use the result from units to account for to answer the units accounted for in this piece. So 119,000. So I'm gonna copy paste the 119,000 here. So now you can do a little bit of backward calculation. I call that a backward calculation because you have the total physical units accounted for first. Then you go back to find the missing data. So in this case, we know that we are going to work on 119,000, and we have 29,000 units left in the ending working process inventory. So therefore, what's the difference? The difference you're using 119,000 minus 29,000. That missing data tells you completed and transferred out units during September. So therefore, you do a subtraction, use the 119,000 to minus 29,000. So the result is 90,000. So basically, you have 90,000 completed and transferred out units. Okay, so that's sort of idea that how you can figure out all the missing data if they are not given. Okay, so that's about step 1. Now let's come to the step 2. The step 2 is about we need to compute output in terms of equivalent units. So the idea of the equivalent units is very brilliant, because when you work on whatever number of units in your factory, you can never guarantee that, okay, I can always manufacture them and complete them, transfer them out. You can never guarantee that. Very often you have some unfinished units in your inventory. Now the question is, for these unfinished units inventory, how can I calculate their unit cost? How can I look at the cost actually they carry on before completion? Of course, you cannot treat these unfinished units the same way as how you treat the complete and transferred out. So now the question is, can I estimate these unfinished units? Can I estimate these unfinished units? So it really depends on how you're going to estimate that. So sometimes a very experienced production manager may tell you, okay, for the remaining 500 unfinished units that are left in the working process and in inventory, maybe I can give you averagely 60% of completion. 60% of completion in terms of conversion cost, or maybe 80% of a percentage of completion in terms of direct materials cost. So the experienced production manager can always give you this kind of approximation. So therefore, this idea of the equivalent units actually is very important. So how are we going to do that? So basically, we'll look at how many different costs are involved in this process. So like in this case, we understand that direct materials and the conversion costs are introduced to the manufacturing process at a different time, and they have different cost behavior. So what we are going to do is we're going to have two columns. One is called direct materials, one is called conversion cost. And because these costs are introduced to the manufacturing process at different times and different stages, so I'm going to treat the cost and also the completion differently. So in this case, for the 40,000 units complete and transferred out, there's no question, regardless what cost we're talking about, we always have 40,000 units carrying 100% of direct materials needed and 100% of conversion cost needed. So therefore, you have 40,000 units, equipment units and the direct materials, and also 40,000 units and the conversion cost. So this basically tells me these 40,000 units that are completed and transferred out, they carry 100% of direct materials cost needed and also 100% of conversion cost needed. So pretty clear. However, when we come to the ending inventory, we know that, well, physically we have 10,000 units. Okay, so it seems to me that we can see that all the direct materials have been introduced to the manufacturing process. So their costs are carried by 10,000 physical units, 100%. So that's why, in terms of equipment units, the direct materials are 100% added, and all these 10,000 unfinished units, they carry 100% of direct material costs. So the equivalent units regarding the direct materials would be 10,000. For the conversion costs, they are not there yet. We still have to put extra labor and maybe extra utilities to complete these 10,000. So under the conversion cost, we can only see that, well, approximately for 10,000 unfinished units, we can count maybe 2,500. And that's sort of idea of equipment units. And once again, in this time, because of different costs are introduced at different times, you have to have each individual column for each cost. So we have direct material cost here, we have conversion cost here. I hope that makes sense to you. So I'm going to go through the next example to show you that how we're going to do that. So let's take a look at this question. So this question says the company had 110,000 partially completed units in working process. Partially complete, which means they are not completed at the end of the March. All of the direct materials had been added to these units. So which means, okay, 100%. So all the direct materials are 100% done for these 110,000 partially completed units. But the units were only 68% of the way through the conversion process. In addition, you are going to work on 1,200,000 units that had been completed and transferred out of the frying department to the packaging department during the month. Okay, so you probably can figure out what is the total number of physical units, because all you have to do is add the physical units in any inventory to the units completed and transferred. So I would add 110,000 to 1,200,000 to figure out the number of total physical units. Okay, so anyway, so now there are three questions. How many equivalent units of direct materials and equivalent units of conversion costs are associated with the 1,200,000 units completed and transferred out? So compute the equivalent units of direct materials and the equivalent units of conversion costs associated with the 110,000 partially completed units still in ending working process. What are the total equivalent units of direct materials and the total equivalent units of conversion cost for the month? So now let's take a look at step 2. The step 2 says, okay, we have units to account for and we have units accounted for. So pretty easy to deal with. Do we really need to know beginning working process started in production? Probably not, because this part is relevant to equipment units. When you talk about equipment units, we're looking at their status. So the step 2 equipment units only work for units accounted for. The physical units, you have to fill the information for both parts, units to account for and units accounted for. But for the equipment units, step 2, all you have to do is focus on units accounted for, because we want to know their status. So the question says we have 110,000 units left in the ending inventory, and also there are about 1,200,000 units completed and transferred out, and also we have their kind of percentage completion. So first of all, I would say for units completed and transferred out, I have no question that all the direct materials have been added, all the conversion costs have been added to these 1,200,000 finished units. So in terms of equipment units, they should be the same as the number of physical units. So therefore, I'm going to have 1,200,000 and 1,200,000 for these completed and transferred out units. So they're 100% done. However, when I come to the ending working process, I know that physically I have 110,000 units, but I have to be careful with the two separate costs. One is the direct materials conversion cost. I have to know that up to what extent have they been completed. So if you look at the question which in the prior slide, I'm not going to go back there. The question said that the direct materials had been added to all the 110 units completely. So therefore, direct materials cost are down 100% for these 110,000 units that are left in the ending inventory. So working process inventory. So therefore, I would have no problem multiplying 110,000 by 100%, which is the same as 110,000. However, when I come to the conversion cost, the question says that, if you go back to the prior slide, I kind of forget that number. We are having 68%, only 60%. So therefore, when we come to the equivalent units, we are going to multiply 68% by 110,000. Okay, because it's kind of a physically, yes, you have 110,000, but only 60% of conversion cost. Okay, only 60% of required conversion cost actually are added to these 110 units. So therefore, I have to kind of a discount and get fraction of that. So I multiply 110,000 by 68%, and I come up with 74,800 units. So the equivalent units under the conversion cost, we have 74,800. Not really the the 110,000, which is understandable because of a conversion cost. We only look at we only have 68% of them completed. So therefore, if you come to the total equivalent units, all you have to do is you can add different groups of units. Okay, I'm talking about the regarding their status. I add all these equivalent units and each cost column. So for the direct materials, I add 1,200,000 to 110,000. I end up with 1,310,000. If I look at the conversion cost, I can add 1,200,000 to 74,800. So I get the total equivalent units and the conversion cost. So that's how you figure out all these equivalent units. And it's very easy to follow, very important in the meantime. So next, I'm going to take a look at step 3, summarize total cost to account for. Okay, so in this case, we have a beginning working process. So beginning working process in this case, because you have 0 units, so you have 0 direct materials and 0 conversion cost. But normally the accounting records will tell us the cost added during October. So in October, direct materials cost we have $140,000. For the conversion cost, we have $68,000. So the total cost to account for will be the $140,000, which is a result of a cost, which is a result of a $140,000 plus 0. If you have a non-zero number, you have to add them. And for the conversion cost, we have $68,000. Okay, so that's what do we have here. So now let's take a look at the question here. Okay, so this company working process inventory account had a 68,000 beginning balance on May 1st. So, and we split this working process beginning inventory. We have a $43,000 of this related to direct materials, while 25,000 related to conversion cost. So during May, during the May now, the following costs were incurred in the department: direct materials used, direct labor, manufacturing overhead. So the question asks you summarize the department's total cost to account for and prepare a schedule that summarizes the department's total cost to account for by direct materials and conversion cost. So therefore, what's next is we are going to set up a table. Then you are going to have a beginning balance of working process, and you're going to have cost added during May. Then you have total cost to account for, and in the meantime, you're going to have 2 separate columns. One is for direct materials cost, one is for conversion cost, because these two costs, normally they are introduced to the manufacturing process differently. So in this case, we are going to set up a table like that. We have a beginning working process inventory, we have cost added during May, and then we have total cost to account for. Then what's next is, all we have to do is go back to the prior slide. We note that we have a $68,000 value of unfinished units, okay, from the beginning working process balance. And also the question specifies the two different amounts. One is for direct materials, one is for conversion cost. So I'm not going to repeat that, but basically 43,000 and 25,000 for each. The cost added during the May, we also have the information. And the direct materials, we're looking at $103,000, and the conversion cost, we're looking at $162,000. So therefore, the total cost to account for and the direct materials, we add 43 to 103 to arrive at 146,000, and then we add 25 to 162 to arrive at 187,000 conversion cost. So we have a total cost to account for and the direct materials and the conversion cost. And once again, it's very important, you don't want to blend these two different costs because they have different cost behaviors. You just cannot add them to the questions together. So finally, what you can do is step 4, compute the cost per equivalent unit. So now we want to come to the unit cost, which is extremely important. And once again, we're going to follow the same idea. We're going to separate the direct materials from conversion cost. So in this case, the total cost to account for, you have this number, and the conversion cost, you have another number. Then we divide it by, from step 2, the number of total equivalent units. So you have 50,000 and 42,500 and so on. So you can find the cost per equivalent unit and each cost category. So that's an important step. But it's not that bad. Once you finish the step 3, step 2, you just use their results and put it into the step 4 table and complete the work. So step 5 is the following. Step 5 is basically, now we have to do some journal entries because you have to figure out, okay, what is cost of goods manufactured, right? So basically, we're looking at the cost assigned to units complete and transferred out. So this is very important. You have to record one of the very important journal entries. So basically, CGM. And this one is related to your balance sheet because you have to know cost assigned to units in any inventory. That's how you report your balance sheet, right? So very important steps. So I'm going to walk you through that. So what's happening here is you are going to break down your step 2 into 2 parts. Remember, step 2 has units accounted for, right? So basically, we have their status. So one part is completed and transferred out. One part is the ending working process. And you're going to separate these 2 parts, okay, instead of combining them. So you're going to separate them and completed and transferred out. First, we have the equivalent units, and which is 40,000 for each. And also, step 4 tells us the cost per equivalent unit. If you go back to the step 4, we have 2.8, 1.6. So you multiply 2.8 by 40,000 and 1.6 by 40,000 respectively. Then you can figure out the cost assigned to units completed and transferred out. And in the meantime, you can also take a look at the ending working process. And we have their equivalent units in ending WIP from step 2. So please feel free to go back to the prior slides to check these numbers. And what we have here is under direct materials, we have 10,000, and the conversion cost we have 2,500. We also have their unit cost 2.8, 1.6. We always use these numbers. These unit cost, they are the same. They will be used over and over. So the cost assigned, what you can have is multiply 10,000 by the unit cost, multiply 2,500 by unit cost. That's what you get. So then you add these numbers horizontally. So you add direct materials to the conversion cost to figure out, okay, what is CGM? The cost of goods manufactured is going to be 176,000 for the 40,000 units completed and transferred out. Then what is the inventory, ending balance inventory that I need to put in my balance sheet? So you add also these two numbers horizontally, 28,000 to 4,000, you end up with the 32,000. So in your balance sheet, the 32,000 should be included in your inventory report. So that's actually about the step 1 to step 5. Now I'm going to use this example to kind of show you how to complete from step 1 to step 5. So this question is pretty nice. It kind of skipped quite a few steps and jumped to the step 5 directly. So we really don't have to go back to the step 1 to step 4. Let's just focus on step 5. The step 5 has the following. The company produces its product using a single production process. For the month of August, the company determined its cost equivalent units to be as follows. So this is what we have. We have cost per equivalent unit, and direct materials we have $4.20. For conversion cost, we have $2.75. So during the month, the company completed and transferred out 410,000 units to finished goods inventory, and at the month end, 86,000 partially completed units remained in the ending work in process inventory. These partially completed units were equal to 69,000 equivalent units of direct materials and 50,000 equivalent units of conversion cost. Determine the total cost that should be assigned to the following: A. Units completed and transferred out, and units in any work in process inventory, and what is the total cost accounted for, which is pretty easy to get there, and what was the company's average cost of making 1 unit of its product. So there are 3 major questions that we are going to address in this particular problem. So first, we are going to take a look at question 1. Determine the total cost that should be assigned to the following: units completed and transferred out, and units in any work in process inventory. So in order for us to find the 1A, units completed and transferred out, and their costs being assigned, so we have to look at how many units are completed and transferred out. It's about 410,000. So we need to multiply 410,000 units by $4.20 and $2.75 respectively, so that we can find, okay, what is the total cost that 410,000 units carry, that they own about in terms of dollar value. So in this case, we can multiply for 10,000 by $4.20 or $2.75. You can do 2 separate multiplications, or you can just add direct materials to the conversion cost, then multiply the quantity by 410,000, and the result is $2,849,500. I'm not going to use a calculator to verify in front of you, and feel free to do so. So now let's go to part B. The part B is a little bit tricky because this time you do have to have 2 separate calculations, because units in ending working process might be different in terms of equivalency. When we come to the direct materials and conversion cost. Because if you look at the question, it says, well, 86,000 partially completed units, and in terms of direct materials, we can only count 69,000. In terms of conversion cost, we can only count 50,000. So therefore, what's happening here is we probably have to multiply only 69,000 by $4.20 for the total direct materials cost, and 50,000 only by $2.75, only for the conversion cost, because these units are partially completed, and in terms of a percentage of completion, direct materials has different number with the conversion cost. So we have to actually calculate the total cost for each category separately. Okay. So when we have these 2 separate multiplications, we add them, then we arrive at 427,300. So this is once again the trick here. So I would say in this case, you can sort of conclude that, okay, so I'm going to claim that the CGM, cost of goods manufactured, is 2,849,500. So in terms of a balance sheet, the asset part, I have to report my inventory. I will include the 427,300. So don't forget that you have a working process inventory, maybe raw materials, and finished goods inventory. So I'm not going to mention the other two, but you definitely want to include the $427,300, the dollar value working process inventory, to your total inventory account. So the part 2 says what was the total cost accounted for, and in this case, all you have to do is just add units complete and transferred out and units ending working process inventory, this cost to end up with the total cost accounted for, which is $3,276,800. So now the step 3 is what was the average cost of making 1 unit of its product. Actually, the question 3 is the easiest one, because all you have to do is add $4.20 to $2.75 to arrive at $6.95. So don't forget that at $4.20, that's the average cost of direct materials per each unit, and at $2.75, that's the average cost for and the conversion cost for each unit. So you add them and you get the average total cost, okay, manufacturing cost. So next, I'm going to just briefly talk about sustainability and process costing. So basically employs the lean and green practices as even job costing is the same thing. Efficient and environmental friendly, that's consideration, and many parties benefit. So I'm going to let you basically find the corresponding information in the textbook or maybe news articles, and that's not really that important, but that's something you need to be aware of in the future. So the last thing, this learning objective is this particular example. I love to go through this with you and show you some interesting results. So at the end of August, this company mixing department had the total cost to account for of $728,607. Of this amount, $255,927 related to direct materials cost, while the remainder related to conversion cost. You can do the math. You do subtraction, you will get to the remainder, right? The department had 52,230 total equivalent units of direct materials and 45,450 total equivalent units of conversion cost for the month. So compute the cost per equivalent unit for direct materials and the cost per equivalent unit for conversion cost. So the question is not that bad, and all you have to do is, okay, well, I'm going to set up a table. So we have total cost to account for and divided by the total equivalent units. That's how you find the cost per equivalent unit, right? So in this case, you start with the $255,927 and also do the one subtraction to find out the conversion cost. Okay, so that's what you need to do first. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to quickly show you some of the work. Okay, so in this case, I have the following cost. Okay, apologize, I need to move my mouse a little bit differently. Okay. So let me adjust my table here. I want to copy the question information here so that I can get all the numbers. In this case, I will have a $255,927, and for the conversion cost is going to be subtraction. So I'm going to open a calculator and I'm going to do the calculation here. So I'm going to use 728,607 minus 250,927 to arrive at $472,680. Okay. Sorry about it. Oh, I guess I need to move a little bit to this cell. So this is what I get here. So next is relatively simple because all I have to do is, okay, I'm going to check, okay, I have a 52,230 equivalent units and the direct materials. For conversion cost, I have a 45,450 450 equivalent units. So now the next step is division. So I'm going to do the division division. So I'm going to divide 255,927 by 52,230. So the unit cost is $4.90. The next, I'm going to divide 472,680 by 45,450. I get $10.40. So I get $10.40. Alright, so that's what I have here for this particular objective. So I will talk about the learning objective 4 in the next video lecture. Thank you for watching. Okay.